We did not do a coffee chat last week. We were on a roll there and then we missed a whole week. It's terrible. Anyway, we're back.
These
Coffee
things
chat
happen.
with Heather and Krista. Our next webinar is coming up for the third of a series of 10. Very exciting.
Yeah.
We've done 2 already. That's wild.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so this one coming up is something that has become kind of, I don't know, a bit of the nexus around which some of our work has been evolving. Your core needs triad, safety, belonging, and identity. And if you are a subscriber on Patreon, you will have access to all of Heather's, a paid subscriber, I should say, all of Heather's videos on that. But I wanted actually to talk to you about that in relation to your last post about imagination, because you and I were talking before we started recording about how important accessing our imagination is in order to become more grounded as a guide. So how do you would you suggest the idea of imagination plays into the core needs triad, safety, belonging, and identity? Because I know when my safety and belonging especially feel under threat, I feel less imaginative
Yeah.
than I do otherwise. Anyway, riff for me. What's coming up for you?
Well, first of all, I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Like, which comes
Yeah.
first, the chicken or the egg? Which comes first, my loss of imagination and playfulness, or my loss of a sense of safety and belonging and identity? And I don't know that there's one clear answer to that. I think that when we feel threatened and our safety and belonging goes offline and we revert to more amygdala kind of reactive, our nervous system goes into the only thing we have capacity for. We're sending all our blood supply to that response, crisis response center. And so we're going to go into fight, flight, freeze. We don't have access to the higher level thinking. And then we lose our capacity for imagination. So, but the flip side is also true. When we don't lean into our imagination, then we can't reclaim our safety and belonging. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
do a bit of both. We have to ground ourselves and find ways of soothing our nervous system so that we can return to our sense of playfulness and imagination. But we also have to go into the imagination playfulness to be more grounded in those areas of our lives. And so really bringing in, and this is why whenever I do retreats, we always do some playful art making, collaging, playing with clay, something that is, or just being outside and being playful in nature, something that sparks something for us. Because when my imagination is sparked, like my body feels alive and energized in a way that I'm not as easily threatened by something that happens. The things that might trigger me. And just speaking from a personal perspective, if I'm deep in creating something, if I'm writing a really good post that I love to write and it's really energizing me, then I don't get as easily activated. Like I can go online and all the bad news of the day, it's like I can let it flow over me because my mind is engaged in something meaningful and making meaning and developing something creative. So I think there has to be a both and in that. Like we have to lean into, okay, how do I get these needs met so that I can be imaginative? But also, how can I be imaginative so that I'm not as activated into feeling threatened in these particular core needs? That
Yeah,
makes
that's a really good point. I'm just reflecting as you're talking about how big my imagination can be with all the horrible, awful things that could potentially happen, and how I often don't flip that to think about all of the good, positive things that could potentially.
Yeah, yeah,
And I know that's kind of just human, like we're a little bit
yeah.
wired towards the negative. But yeah. The other thing that's coming up for me, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, is the identity piece. Because I think sometimes I worry that if I am too imaginative, uh, or that, yeah, that I'm creating this false self, right? Maybe this is a bit attached to imposter syndrome for me anyway. Um, yeah, like, am I just pretending to be who I claim to be, or is this like a positive imagination of, something that I'm becoming? I don't know if that's entirely clear, but I'm curious about how the identity piece sort of plays
Yeah,
into this
yeah.
imagination and playfulness stuff.
So my current thinking on identity, I mean, I keep evolving my thinking on identity,
Hmm.
but where I am currently is that identity A is not a firm fixed thing. Like none of us
Mm,
has an identity. And all of us are made up of multiple selves, even. Like I don't think that there is,
yeah.
and this is where I sometimes question the language we use around authenticity, because there
Ah,
isn't an authentic Heather. I have multiple selves in me. I have multiple, and the more I read things like internal family systems, Richard Schwartz's work, where he talks about, well, he uses language of the firefighters or the different parts of yourself, like multiple parts of yourself
right.
that will come online when something happens, where you get activated, where you have to. And then I've been reading Bill Plotkin's work, who I've also introduced to in some of the workshops. And he talks about, he plots our multiple selves on the four directions, the wheel of four directions, and talks about how when we're in there's our most healed and whole self, and then there's a shadow self that gets activated. And I don't want to go into all the complexities of that, but the more I lean into that, and the more I learn about this multiplicity in each of us, and the more I recognize, like, when that part, like when you say you're going into imposter syndrome, that's not a false self. That's one part of yourself that you maybe have not fostered enough. You maybe haven't given
Mm,
enough space for it to feel real in yourself, but that doesn't mean it's not real. It's just, it might be a part that you've suppressed and that hasn't felt safe in the world. And so it stayed in this sort of childlike version of itself. And so what our work is not to become one authentic self, but to integrate those parts of ourselves so that they all have full expression in ourselves. And so, one day you'll be the really playful self that's just like, skipping around in the world. And then sometimes you're the more serious self. And you and I know this from our relationship. Like there are moments where we come online and we're like in this really playful mood. And then other times when like we're in the grip of the serious stuff. Those are all parts of ourself. It's
hmm.
not like we're one or the other. And so how do we integrate all of that? And that's where the triad that we talk about, the core needs triad, safety, belonging, identity, when we ground ourselves in legitimate safety and belonging that's not dependent on circumstances, then our more integrated identity can evolve and we can become our more mature, developed selves.
Mm, yeah. I've also found the triad really useful, even just in helping me build my empathy. Like when we're in leadership positions and something happens with an individual, that's where my brain starts to go. I start to go, okay, like, is their safety feeling threatened? Is their
Yeah,
belonging feeling threatened? Like, where is this coming from? Um, and it's really useful. Such a useful framework to sort of even just navigate my own response to someone else who's experiencing those things. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, just as someone trying to become a grounded guide, I think it's really a useful tool to be able to take that 30,000
yeah,
foot view and go, okay, hold on a sec.
yeah, yeah.
I'm reacting right now because I feel like my safety is being threatened. Are they reacting because their feeling of belonging is being threatened? Like what is going
Yeah.
on here? And can we both sort of come to a more mature place, like you say, and bring our more, is there space where our more healed identities can meet?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why Like, I really believe as we've developed this work, like when we first started talking about holding space, we were talking about it more from a kind of external holding space for
Yes.
others. And then we realized as the work evolved, oh, wait, we've got to spend more time actually talking about how to hold space for myself so that I can be in a grounded place to hold space for other people. And similarly with this, with leadership and the whole program we're developing leadership for liminal spaces, it's like, okay, some of that self work, that self reflection, that's knowing yourself and recognizing what activates you when you feel threatened in your safety, belonging.
Hmm.
That gives you a grounding so that you can now externalize that wisdom to recognize, oh, this person is being activated in that. I recognize that. I feel some empathy for that. And I'm not going to force them to do something until they have grounded themselves and have found their way to some of that maturity inside themselves. And so that's what makes us mature enough to lead is
Hmm.
having that self-awareness and grounding and understanding our core needs so that we are much more compassionate and have empathy for other people's core needs.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that
We will,
in,
lots more. There's
yeah,
lots more
lots
to be
more.
said.
2 weeks, end of the month.
Yeah, March
Um,
27th, I think, is the date.
yeah. Yeah. So please sign up if you haven't already. We would love to have you join us for that. Um, this is, I mean, like I say, this has sort of become one of the hubs around which a lot of our work has started to revolve. So we're really
Yeah,
excited to share it with you. And
yeah,
yeah, and get in the weeds with it with the study group. I'm really looking forward to the study group on this one because I think it's gonna be really yeah, really rich. We've already had
yeah,
so many rich discussions about this stuff, and um, it's really exciting to sort of see our participants kind of coming alive and adding so much depth
yeah,
to the material. So
yeah.
highly encourage you to join the study group if you haven't already. So anything else? One last plug.
No, well, maybe I'll also mention that we are bringing back a program. When speaking of this,
Oh yes.
self-reflection. We're just in the process of reviving a program formerly called Know Yourself for Yourself. We're adapting our language a little bit right now, but it will be coming in the next week or two. So watch for that. And that's very particularly on this
Yes.
self-reflection and getting to know yourself so that you can be in more healthy and evolved relationships.
Yeah, such a great program. This will be our 4th year, I think, running
I
it.
think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Fourth or fifth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fourth
Yeah.
or fifth. Anyway, it's such a rich program. If you are familiar at all with the second module of our holding space program, which is holding space for yourself, this is like a meteor version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in these days when the ground does feel very shifty, um, knowing ourselves is probably more important than ever. So we'd encourage you to keep an eye open for that as well.
Coming soon
All right, coming soon. We'll
to a
see you at our
computer
next
near
coffee
you.
chat.